Welcome back, Internet, and thank you for joining me once again as I recap The Walking Dead. This week I'm recapping the episode entitled Still, as in The Walking Dead is still moving at a painfully slow pace. So this episode we get Beth and Daryl, and I pretty much expected it to be nothing but Daryl killing walkers and pretty much looking like a badass, and Beth doing, well, what Beth does, which is cry. And sure, there was some of that, obviously, but there was a lot more than that. I'm kind of conflicted on this episode because on one hand, it's still very slow and not that much happens, but there's some good character moments in it as well, and I would say it almost redeems it. It doesn't fully redeem it. It still feels like there should have been a lot more happening in this episode. But basically the whole premise is, Daryl and Beth are hanging out in the woods, and Daryl's eating a snake, he hunts it and kills it. He's just in there chowing down, and Beth decides, you know what, I really don't want to live in the woods anymore. I want to go do something to relax, and she wants to go have her first drink. She's never drank alcohol before, So they're off to find her a drink, and at first Daryl's reluctant, and eventually he's probably thinking, like, you know what, I could go for a drink as well. I need something to wash this snake down. But anyway, so they find some country club, and they get in there. They have to fight off some walkers, obviously, because there's walkers everywhere. And it's really interesting. Once they get in there, there's a lot of like class warfare type stuff. They find a dead walker that has "rich bitch," on a piece of paper across her, and Beth wants to cover her up. Anyway, Beth eventually does find some alcohol. She finds some peppermint schnapps. And obviously you can tell she's a new drinker because she's looking for a clean glass, but all of them are stained with blood, as if she couldn't just drink it from the bottle. And you can just tell the whole time Daryl's there. He's uncomfortable and he doesn't like being there. So anyway, he eventually just grabs the bottle of peat schnapps, rather, and just chunks it into the ground. He's like, your first drink is not going to be this garbage. I'm going to get you a real drink. So they go to this house where moonshine is being manufactured, and they get bottles upon bottles of moonshine. And Beth finally gets her first drink, which I'm sure tasted like fire. And she tries to get Daryl to drink. At first he's reluctant, and finally he's like, alright, I'll drink, but you won't like me when I'm drunk. And basically that's pretty much what happens. They start arguing. They've kind of been arguing the whole time they've been together, and Daryl just kind of goes off on her, because obviously she's the girl that had everything handed to her, where he pretty much was a bum. Obviously we saw in previous episodes, he was abused by his dad, and, he's just talking about, prior to the zombie apocalypse, he was pretty much nobody. He was a drifter with him and Merle, just pretty much up to no good. And so he grew up in the type of house where they find the moonshine. It's pretty much the type of house that he grew up in. So it's bringing back bad memories, so on top of that. And so, they're arguing back and forth, and, he's loud enough where it attracts a walker. And Daryl obviously he's drunk at this point, and instead of just killing the walker, he's just screwing with it, and he's pretty much doing an impromptu training session to teach Beth how to use a crossbow, and I don't know, it was pretty crazy. It kind of shows you, like, obviously he wasn't that great of a guy while he was, back in his old days, especially if he was drinking back then. So we see why he initially does not want that drink. So anyway, Beth eventually just kills the walker, puts an end to that whole thing. And then Daryl pretty much just breaks down. He blames himself for, the prison being destroyed by the governor, and allegedly, as far as they know, everyone's been killed, and his whole thing is like, him is shown we're tracking the governor, and he should have found him. But I think it's funny because it's not like the governor went into hiding. He literally went back to Woodbury, so after I saw that scene, I was like, that kind of reminds me, like, how did they not find him? Because he was literally just wandering around after burning down Woodbury, and it's not like he covered his trail at all, but whatever. Either way, he's all bummed out, and then Beth's like, I have an idea, let's burn things. So they use the rest of the moonshine to burn down the house, and they're just watching it burn. And it's kind of a nice character moment as well. Like, pretty much for me, like, for the moonshine scene towards the end, the episode it picked up a lot, and it was very interesting, but overall, I wish that they could have done this while also moving the plot forward more. I felt like that's why the first few episodes of this season were so good because it had a lot of tension, it had a lot of great character moments, but stuff was actually still happening. It's not just like some arbitrary reason where it's like, oh, I want to go get a drink, let's have an adventure. But overall, I didn't dislike this episode as much as I thought I was going to early on in it, but it still had a lot to be desired. And unfortunately, it looks like the next episode's going to be much the same. I would say the most disappointing thing is that I really want them to get to the terminus. I was really hoping they were going to explore the storyline with Eugene, knowing the origin of the zombie virus. And it seems like they want to push that to season 5. That's how I feel. It feels like, and when everyone finally regroups, or those that do, or if we find any more information, it's going to be like maybe in the season finale at best, at worst, like the beginning of next season. But it feels like they're really trying to drag this second half of the season out, and it's really disappointing. But as far as Still is concerned, not bad. A lot better than I expected. I'm kind of glad Beth didn't die. I originally wanted her to die when the governor had attacked the prison. Because you need a casualty. Beth doesn't really do anything. But I don't know. She's not that bad of a character. I feel like now that they've kind of given her a little bit more of the spotlight, she's actually been able to come into her own. And I just enjoyed how self-aware she was when she's sitting there hanging out with Daryl after his whole drunken outburst. She's like, you're going to be the one who survives in the end. You have all the skills, like, you're pretty much made for this. And, he's just like, humble. He's like, yeah, well, I had to do this stuff to survive, in the world I was living in. And she's like, I'm going to die sooner or later. I can't do what you do. And, the fact that she's aware of that, and seems like she's pretty much made peace with that. She's like, well, hey, let me enjoy what little life I have left, and not be all bummed about it and crying all the time. But, well, she'll probably still cry a lot. But, what can you do? Anyway, so this has been my review. It's a very short, little under the weather, but it is what it is. And stay tuned for next week. I'll try to have the video up on time, which is on Thursday. Until then, you can go to PTWOR, that's punchingthewallsofreality.com. Be sure to leave any comments, questions, or suggestions. And until then, go drink some moonshine until you black out.